Ivana Trump. Imagine if it were Don Jr.'s laptop instead of Hunter Biden's. Twitter and Elon are still going at it, and Pelosi's, they're still criminals. Our farmland is being sold to Bill Gates and to China. I don't know why. Starbucks is moving out of some Democrat cities, and Skittles are poisonous. Bobby East was stabbed to death, and science is proving the existence of God. January 6th hearings continue to be fictional political theater. J-Lo and Ben Affleck, they got married. Brandon Falls is now a national landmark. Bannon is guilty, and Lee Zeldin was attacked, and his attacker was set free. I'm Mimi. This is The Rundown. Here's Politics Plus podcast.
Politics Plus podcast, where we talk about politics and so much more. So I'm Mel, here with my co-host Mark, and today we're going to be talking to Michael Byrne and Martin Hyde. But before we start this episode, please like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Anchor, and Audible. Here we go. Okay, so I'm not going to hit you too hard with these questions. Just, the topic that we are going to talk about is voluntary vulnerability. And seeing that you ran for school board, we just wanted to, get an aspect of what it is to put yourself out there. Like me personally doing this podcast, I didn't do it to get any fame, notoriety, any likers like that. I just, wanted to put myself out there just to see if there was somebody else with the same, opinions that I had, just to have adult conversations. Right. And that's why I put myself out there. Now, we want to know, why did you put yourself out there? Give us a little background of who you are, and you ran for the Longwood School District, and we just want to know who you are and what you see as, what changes did you, I guess, see in running, and I guess we'll take it from there.
I have a 9-year-old son. He's about to be 10, going into 5th grade. And to be honest, and to be, truth be told, I had no interest in school boards, what was going on. Other than my son's classroom, I didn't pay a lot of attention to much of anything. Once the mask stuff started, that's when I started to really start paying attention to what the school was doing, who's on the board, how they're handling things, if they're doing enough. And I really just decided to become an advocate just for my son. I had no aspirations of running for school board. Absolutely none. That's just not.
So pretty much at this point, you were just, taking, like I was, just to see as a parent, seeing how things were going.
Yeah, I thought I owed it to him to at least do whatever I could to get his life back to normal, because I really saw it having, he had an adverse reaction to it, the being away from his friends, being isolated, being stuck home all the time. He started to change, like, kind of who he was. And that really, it not only upset me, it made me angry, because it was so unnecessary. It was never necessary to ever do that to the kids. So when that started, once I was in it, you can't get out of it, because you can't unsee what you're seeing. So I just got more and more involved. I was at every board meeting. I joined committees. That's how it really got started for me in the beginning.
So it just pretty much snowballed into running for, school board.
Yeah, it really came from a place of, I had so many people ask me if I would do it. And originally I was supporting someone else to do it. And then they They weren't able to do it. So at the last minute, I think I had maybe less than 2 weeks to get my signatures and my paperwork. And so I was kind of thrust into it. But I said, you know what? It's worth a try. You know what I mean? I'm no worse for the wear giving it a shot. You know, so that's when I decided to actually get into it. But, you know, it really was people just asking me, you know, how come you don't think about doing it? And, I start to think that, you know, stop looking for someone else to do it for you. You know, everyone's got to do it. You know, everyone's got to step up and do their best. Don't look over your shoulder and look for help. You have to do it yourself.
So now that, you know, pretty much you got your feet wet in running, how was that experience?
I'd like to say that I expected a lot of what happened. I expected it, but not to the level that it got. I got a full, and I've used this term before, social media colonoscopy. Well, I'll take you back to when this whole thing started. Before I ran for school board, I was on all the parent pages, and I was arguing with people who were not only okay with their kids' lives being turned upside down for no reason, they were actually attacking other parents who didn't want their kids to be subjected to this stuff. You know, instead of just like, you know, I'll wear my mask, you do your thing, like a live and let live, that's not good enough for them. So I argued with a lot of parents, and those are the people that really came after me. There was like a little coalition of them that came after me, went back 10, 12 years on my Facebook page to find whatever they could to try to discredit me. Because as you know, liberals don't want to battle in the arena of ideas. They want to label you, you know, smear you, demean you to make you shut up and stop saying what you're saying. That's their whole modus operandi. And they tried it.
Yeah, going by emotions instead of reasoning. Well,
you know what it is? They can't,
or facts.
They can't battle in a debate because their debates go nowhere. You know, they have to label you racist, homophobic, whatever it is, to make you stop saying what you're saying because you're making them look ridiculous. So they try to intimidate you into shutting up. So
now that you say that, like, I know, but how did you react to that, and how did your family react to that?
That's a really good question, Mel. My wife had a very hard time with it, you know, because, you know, that's her husband that's being attacked, and she's powerless to do anything about it. So she just has to sit on the sidelines and watch me be labeled all these things that she knows I'm not. And it was I told her, if I was in your spot, I said, I would have been driving around with a bat looking for these people. You know what I mean? So, I mean, this is very, very difficult for her to go through. For me, I love it. That's fuel for me. Like when I put stuff up on Facebook that might be a little controversial, I'm not looking for likes, pats on the back, people who agree with me. That's all fine. I want someone to come in and challenge me.
Yeah.
Because I need that debate. I love that stuff. I thrive on it. So it was tailor-made for me. I loved every minute of it. It was great.
So it's fair to say that fueled you instead of making you say, you know what, I'm just done. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to run anymore. It never
made me do that because at the end of the day, I'm doing it for my son. There's nothing you could say or do that's going to make me abandon what I think is best for him. You know, it's only going to embolden me to try even harder. And I made that clear during my campaign. Whether I'm on the board or I'm off the board, I said, my son's going into 5th grade. I'm not going anywhere. I will be at every board meeting. I will be at every committee meeting. You're going to know who I am because I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to be on the board to make change and advocate for change. You can do it from the stands, the same as you can up on the dais.
So now that you gained some experience, did you get a little bit more of how it is? Is it actually, you know, since this was a school board election, is it political? Because they say it isn't.
Anybody who says anything's not political is just not paying attention, because everything is political. Every TV show, movie, music, schools, your job, everything has been politicized by them, not by us. You know, we separate our lives. I don't exist to talk about politics. That's a part of who I am, but that has nothing to do with me as a dad or a husband or but their lives are dedicated to liberalism. That's their religion.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about anything else. That's what they want to do. And we're not like that.
Now, I know some of the opponents were endorsed, and they were endorsed by political groups. Were you
I was endorsed by the loud
anyone?
majority, which was a huge honor for me because I love those guys. Sean invited me on his podcast. Yes, I mean,
So
they
do I.
were, and I had like Moms for Liberty. They endorsed me. There was a lot of fellow patriot groups were very kind in trying to do all they could to help me.
With that being said, you got to see the
Yeah.
background of what it is. Would you have changed anything in your campaign? Any regrets
You know what?
that
I
you
don't
had?
have a regret that I ran because it was eye-opening for me. And I honestly, I would not change a thing. I had people helping me that have been through this before, and their big thing was, you have to tone this down, tone that down, and I'm like, listen, I am who I am. I'm either going to win this being exactly who I am, or I'm going to lose on who I am. I can't be a different person now as opposed to when I get on the board. I want them to see who I am. Yeah, well, you know what?
So-
if I'm going to represent the community, they need to know exactly what they're getting in me. And if I don't represent the majority opinion, I don't belong on the board. And I'm okay with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Pure honesty.
I said from the beginning, you can't threaten me by losing a job that doesn't pay any money and takes up a ton of your time. If I lose that, I'm going to be okay. I'll get through it. It's no big deal.
Exactly.
And I will continue to advocate from where I was before I even started trying to run. So, not going anywhere.
So, unfortunately,
Nope.
you didn't win. But the hard question: are you going to run again?
If I don't think there's a qualified candidate that has a chance to win, then I'll absolutely run again, without a doubt. I think I'm better off probably helping someone else run a campaign. I've worked on political campaigns before. I worked for Newt Gingrich. I worked for Mitt Romney, which makes me nauseous now. Yeah, disgusting. But so I mean, I have a little experience with that kind of stuff, and I think in our community, we have a wide array of populations in Longwood, as you know, Melly, and I think for some of the constituency, I think I might be a little too Trumpish for them, a little too outspoken, a little too I won't. There's no way for them to shut me up with what they usually use to shut people up, and I don't think they like that.
Do you think that was
I think
a
it absolutely
hindrance?
was. I think the biggest thing for me is that I would never be comfortable enough in learning about somebody's character or who they are from Facebook memes. But these people were able to extrapolate my entire life from a few things I put up on Facebook without ever having met me in person. I could never characterize somebody as a racist or homophobic without actually having a physical conversation with them. But they don't want to have the conversation. They're looking to get validated on what they already believe I am without ever having spoken to me. And that's what they did.
So any of those experiences, were you attacked personally, or was it just, just based on what they saw when you were speaking, or just on your Facebook?
The Facebook stuff they took, and they completely went into attack mode. Because again, they don't want to have a free, fair election. They want to convince enough people that I'm something I'm not to scare them from voting for me. Because if you label someone as a racist, well, if you vote for a racist, that makes you racist by extension. So that's their whole way of doing things.
Yeah.
So whether it was, if I don't want sex ed being taught to first graders, well, you're homophobic. You're transphobic. If I don't want, whatever the issue is, there's a label for it, and they label you this because it scares people from attaching themselves to you. Critical race theory. That's another one. If you don't want that taught in schools, you're racist. And well,
Yeah.
there's a difference between teaching history. We have a wonderful history. We also have some awful parts of our history that need to be taught. You have to tell the whole story, not just the good parts. That doesn't mean we have to teach people to hate their country,
Yeah.
to hate police officers, and to hate each other because of how they look.
Yeah.
That's a very different thing, and that line gets blended all the time on purpose. So right away, well, here's a racist. Well, nobody's going to vote for me because I'm racist. So he's homophobic. That's what they do. That's the whole purpose of the coordinated attacks, is to do that. And hats off to them. It worked. It worked. They succeeded.
You said that you used to be in politics, as helping. Would you run for office, maybe down the road?
I absolutely would consider that if enough people pushed me for it. I absolutely would. As a matter of fact, it's funny.
You have our vote.
Well, first of all, let me say this before I even answer that. I can't tell you how overwhelming it was to see how many people did vote for me, because essentially they're voting to put their kids' school experience in part in my hands. That's something that I take very seriously. I mean, that's what better homage can you pay to somebody than say, I trust you with my son or daughter's school experience. So I was blown away by that from the beginning. And when I did the podcast for Loud Majority, we were done, and I was hanging out with Sean and a few of the guys afterwards, and he said he's got a bunch of text messages and calls from people that said, forget about the school board. He needs to run for something bigger than that. And I said, you know what? If I saw an opportunity, and I was able to see that I could put an infrastructure in place to make it happen, and I had the time to dedicate to it, because I don't want to do it for a business card. If I'm not going to make a difference, I'm not going to do it. I would absolutely do it, because again, back to what I said before. You can't wait for other people to come around and bail us out. We all have to do it. And it's uncomfortable. Who wants to go up on a stage and answer uncomfortable questions? Or you put yourself out there, even your podcast. If people hear about your podcast, they listen to it, that can affect your job. That can affect a lot of things. But if none of us do this, we will continue to lose the culture war. That can't happen. We haven't lost it yet, but we will if more people like us don't stand up. And don't worry about having a bullseye put on you. We have to all pitch in and do it, because it's going to take all of us to beat this back.
That was so nicely put. I don't know. Danny, do you have a question?
It's too much.
Do you have a question for him?
Oh, my heart. My head's big enough, Dan. It's swelling. Hopefully, I see myself still very much involved in what my son is doing, because I have one son. I'm not having any more kids, and I say it all the time. I have a construction company. I work with my dad. I love my job. Everything is fine, but nothing I do in my daily life is ever going to be remembered by anybody. The only thing that's going to be remembered, my legacy, is my son, the kind of dad I am, the kind of husband I am. So everything else pales in comparison to that. So 5-10 years from now, I see myself still very involved in my son's life and doing whatever I can to help him be successful. And because I want him to be a man who helps turn the tide when he gets older, because I don't think we don't have enough men. When I say men, I'm not talking about gay or straight. I mean men with testosterone. It's okay to be a man. It's okay to take charge of a situation. It's okay to do those things. I'm not raising a son that's afraid of toxic masculinity. I'm raising someone who you'd want next to you in a foxhole if stuff ever hit the fan, if you know what I mean. So very old school that way. So 5-10 years, I'm hoping that, he's in college and he's doing well, and I'm there to support him. And if I'm in office at that point, I would love that too. I would absolutely love to do something like that. I always said if I can go back to college and redo everything, I would become an attorney, and I would have went right into politics from the word go. Because I love it. I love it.
Hmm.
Oh, what I would do is I would tell him if it's something that you feel you need to do, then you need to do it. I teach him you don't, whether you're arguing with one people or 50,000 people, you don't back down. You don't take any steps back, not even an inch, because that's what they want. If you don't ever shy away from anything because you're afraid of being exposed for who you are, what you believe. How come we're the only side that has to worry about being exposed for what we believe? That's they've. I mean, it's seriously. You think about it. Even it happens to me sometimes. Like you'll be in a conversation and you'll go to say something like, "Oh, there's liberals in here." Like that's like they've almost trained society to be that way. I'm teaching my son to be the complete opposite. You be who you are. You do what you think is right. And if people don't like it, the world's a big place. You can get the hell away from it. You know what I mean? I don't have to change my opinion because your feelings are hurt.
Yeah.
You don't have the right not to have your feelings hurt. You can be offended, but that's your problem, not mine. You could either learn to see who I really am. Maybe we could be friends, or you could get far away so you don't have to hear my voice anymore. But either way, I'm not going to change who I am. That's just the way it is. Period. No,
Oh
I
no,
can't.
don't change.
I can't.
Don't change.
That's what we need though. Even like I said, through this whole thing, we don't have enough warriors on our side. All their boats always sail in the same direction. They don't have any dissension in their ranks. They don't have Mitt Romney's and John McCain's on their side. During primary season, they'll have a little scuffle because they want the nomination. Once that's done, they are all acting as one all the time. We savage each other. We can't wait to prove to them that we're not racist and homophobic. And while we're fumbling around on defense, they are always on offense. And we have to change that. We have to change that.
So, I was just going to say, yeah, in closing, you have no regrets of running for the Longwood School District.
Not at all.
So you took this more as a learning experience than anything else.
The best thing to come from it, one, it was a great example for my son because I showed him some of the things that they were saying about his dad, and to show him like this person has never actually met me, and look what they're saying about me. I said, that's liberalism. That's what these people are all about. They don't want to have debates. They want to destroy people who don't sign on to the group thing. So I don't have any regrets because a lot of the friends that I had that didn't realize how far left some people are, it really opened up a lot of people's eyes to see people who know me and saw what they were saying about me. Like, are they insane? I'm like, yes, they are insane. So I think it pulled the curtain back on how crazy they are, and we have to keep doing that if we want to win. Oh, yeah.
Well, it was nice chatting with you. It was a pleasure. Awesome. We like you so much. And again, if you do decide to run, I'm always here.
If I ever decide to run for anything, I'm coming on here to announce it, without a doubt. Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, guys. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it. It was an honor to be on.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So just give us a little background of who you are and what you're running for down in Florida.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously it's my version of events. So, I'm Martin Hyde. I'm running for the House of Representatives here. So there are 29 congressional seats in Florida because congressional seats are shared according to population. So some states, as they lose people and lose seats, and Florida gained one this time around. So That meant that they had to redistrict. And actually, ironically, means that I can't vote for myself because at this moment, so that's one vote gone. At this moment, I don't live in the district. The district that I live in or lived in was Florida 16, and it was the northern part of Sarasota County, all of Manatee County, which is to the north of us, and a little bit of Hillsborough. But because they had to move around to accommodate a whole new seat, everybody got shifted around a bit, and I got essentially pulled north. So the county line now, Sarasota is no longer part, although the picture behind me is of Sarasota where I live, in Manatee County, which is Bradenton and Palmetto and various other places, all the way up to, ironically, Brandon, as in Let's Go Brandon, in Hillsborough County. So most of the way to Tampa, nearly 1,000 square miles, nearly 800,000 people, most of whom I'll never get to meet. And we're talking about a primary here. So we're not talking about a general election. We're talking about a closed primary in Florida, which means that only registered of one party or the other can vote. I'm running against, if you will, although I'm not really running against anyone. I'm running, for myself. But I'm running against a guy that's an 8-term incumbent, a guy called Vern Buchanan. And then, you get into the other questions
8 terms, wow.
Maybe we'll get into of why you're running and so on and so forth. But essentially, that's what I'm doing. I'm a father of 4. I'm 57 years old this year. In case people question, how old is that old guy? That's how old he is. And it's a fool's errand. If this job pays a lot less than I can make in the commercial world, and in the commercial world, my staff don't make fun of me or tell me off. So when you find people running, it's easy to hate on them, and it's easy to find differences with them. But if people don't run, then you end up with a kind of a feudal system. And then people say, and it's the old phrase, right? How did this happen? And we get the government we deserve. Anybody that runs, whether they're a Democrat, whether they're a Libertarian, whether a Republican, whether they're good or bad, is actually doing a service to their community. And from my point of view,
you just answered my first question.
Sure. Well, I think it's important that people. Go on.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I'm going to ask you what drove you into a life of public office, and you just answered that question by.
I was going to ask that too.
Well,
it was well said.
I think there are lots of things. In truth, although people won't acknowledge it, there's an element of narcissism. I've almost never met a politician or an aspiring politician that wasn't a little bit of a showboater. I'm sure there are people that will acknowledge that they like being in front of the camera. In truth, most people will say they do it for a reason. Whether that reason is the truth or not, it's hard to say. I know it's not about money. People always talk about, the bribes and how wealthy you can get in Congress. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that there's a sense of self-importance that comes with it. There's only 435 people in Congress. Most of the seats aren't really competitive. They'll either go red or blue. So once you're in, it's actually quite hard to get beaten out. And one of the things that, I'd like to raise and have a conversation about is the main thing that I've got a problem with in our Constitution, not many things, but we don't have term limits for Congress. And you remember when George Washington was offered the presidency for life originally, and he said, allegedly anyway, we don't want another King George. And he was right. And the feudal and the baronial system from Britain from the last 1,000 years, we've kind of brought that along now because we've got people in Congress that have the most influence because they've been in there for the longest. That's not the same as them being the most innovative or the best. And I like Chuck Grassley, by way of example, from Iowa there. But, he's running for re-election this year. He'll be 95 by the end of his next term. That doesn't make any sense.
So how do you change it, Martin?
Not because old is no good. Well, because, look, in 1994, you may not be old enough to remember, but Newt Gingrich ran and pushed out the majority that Clinton had at that time in the House by making a contract with America, so-called, which all the conservatives signed up for. And one of the main tenets of it was term limits. And that was the last time it was ever really discussed because turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving. Why would you vote yourself out of a job? There's no interest other than self-interest in most people. Well, it's true. It's self-interest is most people's driving interest. And when you start Go on.
It is very true. But the question is, though, seriously, how would you, because you don't want to run forever. I understand that about you already, but not everybody else most people want to be there forever. So how do you change that? How do you get them to vote for Thanksgiving? Like you're saying, the turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving, but how do you get them to vote for term limits? You can't. I mean, really, how do you do it?
How do you do it? Well, the same way that, if you remember back in 2016, in the summer of 2016, Brexit in Europe, there were in the UK, both major parties wanted to stay in Europe. The Conservative Party and the Labour Party, both sides, red and blue team, both wanted to stay in. The British people, though, didn't buy the narrative, and they decided to vote out. And when you're swimming against the tide, eventually your arms will get tired. It's a moment in time. I can't influence it other than to expose the fatal flaw in it, which is that we're not electing people to rule us. We're electing people to serve us. And when you have establishment types, when you have people that have been in for decades, I mean, by way of example, and not to be mean about him, but my opponent got a $5,000 donation from Bill Gates. Now, for a conservative to take money from Bill Gates doesn't make a lot of sense. But why does Bill Gates give money to my opponent? It's because they like the status quo, because they like things as they are. And the biggest challenge that people have to getting elected is not new ideas or being credible. It's the fact that most of the big money in congressional type stuff, federal type stuff, starts and begins in DC. And that's your problem is really, I think you could come at it from a different angle. I agree that you're not terribly likely to get turkeys to vote for Thanksgiving, but maybe some kind of campaign finance reform. One of the differences, and again, I don't talk about the UK because it's better, because it's not, but one of the things about elections in the UK is that general elections are maximum 45 days. Here, they go on almost indefinitely. Wow. You're running a presidential campaign for 15, 18 months, and that requires many, many millions of dollars. In the UK, a general election campaign is 45 days max. And that's a good thing, because it restricts the amount of money that's needed to win. And that is the chicken and egg thing. Mm-hmm. People like me can afford, to a limited extent, to self-fund. But that keeps a lot of people out of it. I mean, I've spent a few $100,000 to probably get my ass whooped. But to the degree that you would have to run to beat somebody that raised $2 million already this year, most of which came from out of state, most of which wouldn't know Vern Buchanan if he sat in their lap. That's your real problem, is the money in politics. And people say, well, why is the money there? It's not because they love any one particular person. It's because they have an agenda. And until or unless you push back against special interests and lobbyists, and particularly the way that this money trickles to a select group, it doesn't matter whether you're a conservative or whether you're a liberal. Both sides get huge sums of money just to keep things as they are. And if you try to run, you could be a wonderful candidate. Very hard to run against people with no money.
So I have a question.
Sure.
With that being said, how did you feel getting endorsed by General Flynn and Roger Stone?
Well, I mean, Roger I paid, so to be fair, he endorsed me because I endorsed a check to him. So
I think I really
let's not be under any illusions. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not pretend otherwise. Politics is a funny thing. As strange bedfellows, there's this general sense that people, their endorsement means a lot. I suspect that President Trump's endorsement means a lot in a conservative primary. I suspect that on the other side, the endorsement of a mainstream Democrat would too. But Roger's a cool guy. I mean, he's a fascinating character. He's had an interesting life. But as far as General Flynn is concerned, that's a different angle. That's about a certain percentage of people that feel that there was something wrong there in 2020. And that's a much more complex subject. General Flynn is the poster child for that election. General Flynn is also the poster child for the establishment versus Trump. I mean, if you remember what happened back in early 2017, Flynn was on a phone call. He was in the Caribbean with the Russian ambassador. Should have known, because he was a former NSA guy himself. He should have known he was being recorded, but he overlooked that. And then he made the biggest mistake of all, which again was unusual because he did know that the whole problem he had was not what he did, is the fact that he lied about it afterwards. It's always the cover-up, right? So Flynn, arguably was trapped by the FBI, but, he wasn't a babe in the woods. It was a stupid thing that he did. But then he became the poster child for that, this argument that there were different branches of government fighting against each other. And let's be frank. Again, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, these asinine, childish games that go on up there will make you vomit. You're talking about, well, did Comey set Trump up? Did he set Flynn up? And then, did this guy Brennan get involved and this guy? And when are we actually going to get to deal with some real problems? Because it really isn't an issue. Arguably, we should be talking about then, arguably, there was this whole false flag about Russian influence in an election. And the real influence in an election, this argument that you could spend a few million and get a few likes on Facebook and that somehow that would shoehorn Trump in. The reason Trump won was because everybody, well, not everybody, but a significant number of people didn't like Hillary. If it hadn't have been Hillary, if it had been somebody who didn't say something stupid like deplorables, Trump couldn't win. Trump can't win against a solid Democrat. He can only win against somebody like Hillary. So they shot themselves in the foot there.
We were actually discussing
Flynn.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go on.
Well, we were actually discussing earlier a possible run by Michelle Obama, and we thought, or my thought was that there's no way someone like Trump could win against the most popular woman in the world, and she's Michelle Obama.
Well, yeah.
So like you said,
we're talking about Michael, right?
Trump pretty much lost because he was. What's that?
No. What he said there's funny because a lot of conservatives call Michelle Michael. I think the thing is that she's a polarizing character, and let's be frank, guys. There's a lot of racial element there too. There's no question, as far as I'm concerned, that she would pick up a tremendous amount of support amongst women. I think she would find a tremendous amount of support, obviously, within the African American community, and that might be enough to win. I think the Democrats are going to find someone outside of the field that they've got right now, because I don't think Kamala is terribly popular.
Oh, wow.
And you can't keep running 80-year-old candidates. At some point, I'd like to see someone come through. And if the best you've got is Pete Buttigieg, I think your bench is a little light. So
wow.
We'll find out in the next year or so. Somebody will come to the fore. When you go on.
I have a question. Why should people vote for you? What makes you different from your counterpartner?
Well, the first thing is that if you ask me the weather, I won't tell you the time. Most politicians, when you ask them a question, will repeat it back to you so they can think of a silly answer that means nothing. And the way that they do it is that you ask me a question and I say, that's a great question. Meanwhile, my head's going, now how can I answer this without answering it? And how can I not offend a certain number of people? Because that's a big part of it, right? It's not a question of engaging people. It's a question of not pissing people off. And so...
I love your style, Martin, I gotta say.
Well, not because I'm... Yeah, well, it's not much of a style, and it's probably not a winning thing. But, the point is, only because it's unusual. It's unusual to hear somebody tell you the truth. And if you ask me if I did it, I'll tell you I did. I'm not going to give you the scarecrow thing and tell you somebody else did.
With that being said, exactly I do have...
Go on.
So I have another, question. I don't know if it's question, concern, but in doing research for you, I started looking online, and I started to notice that there's not a lot of nice things about you
That's because it's
online.
online.
Now, what I wanted to know, was that all fabricated, from the mainstream media? Was it, what's the truth behind that?
Well, I mean, the truth is that bad news travels a lot further and a lot faster than good news. That I say a lot of stuff, and it's not that difficult to pick out one or two things in my 56 years and say, well, that defines him. And there are certain terms that we use in the world today, cancel culture. We're in a world where one or two phrases, can identify you forever. And we can go back across celebrities and we can remember one thing about them, two things about them, right back. And I can date myself going back, from, I remember, Nixon, when he turned around and said, I'm not a crook, or, you don't want your president to be a crook. I'm not a crook. And then it turned out he was. And I remember H.W. Bush, again, another Republican, saying, watch my lips, read my lips, no new taxes. Yep. And then he had to increase taxes. So that was him gone. And the thing is that we remember these things. We don't remember the fact that H.W. Bush was a war hero, or that before Watergate, Nixon probably would have been one of the people on Mount Rushmore for what he did with China and the various other things. So I can't unring a bell. I've said and done some stupid things in my life. I've also said and done some smart things, and that just doesn't. I'm not going to say sell newspapers. It's not. What do they use the term now? Clickbait, right? I'm good clickbait. I'm that nice, wealthy. English. I mean, the number of people is ironic. They talk about race in this country. The number of people that tell me almost every day, why don't I go back where I came from? Imagine if I said that to an African American, they'd be held to pay. But it's just as purgative, it's just as inappropriate. But I don't dwell on it too much. I just keep moving forward. I accept that if you Google me, I'll never get a date ever again. Because if you Google me, all you're going to see is bad stuff. Nobody's going to want to go out with me. So that
leads me to a perfect question for you, Martin, I think. Without even bringing up the law enforcement incident, okay, do you regret opening yourself up to public scrutiny the way you have, as just become, being who you are now as a politician? Do you regret being out in the limelight for people to scrutinize?
For me, no. For other people around me, I've got 4 kids. My youngest is still in, just starting high school. So, that's a tough time. Nobody wants to be, seen and identified. And when your father is seen and identified in a negative way, that's a tough thing for him to have to bear. My oldest son, ironically, and we don't have to get into that particular incident, is a cop. So imagine what that's like, being a cop locally, knowing that your father is somewhat famous for chewing off a cop. So I have regret for that. I regret for the collateral damage to people around me. I regret for what it's done to a limited extent to my employees, because they've had to, doesn't that guy own your company? And one's got nothing to do with the other. The quality of the goods and services that my companies supply to people is not the question. What my character is or isn't according to one snapshot shouldn't be relevant. Am I sorry that I don't get identified as the second coming? Yeah, sure, but I think there's a value here. I've got fairly thick skin. I had some bad moments. I'll be honest with you.
Well, that was a bad moment in
February. When that's the kind of.
Sorry, that was a bad moment in your political life. But when I was thinking about it, I was wondering how has that incident actually proved positive for you? I mean, what good things have come out of that incident that happened? Because it's very obvious you've reached a notorious state now because of that one video, correct? So what positive has come out of it?
And if you go to Google Trends, which is you can search on Google and it'll put in a name and then you can compare it to other things. You'll see that absolutely, in terms of searches, not only from that time, but even up to now. These things live, for some time out there. I have reached a level of notoriety versus fame that is disproportionate to my status. I don't think there's any really good thing about that. I mean, genuinely, when I walk down the street, there's a certain amount of people that look at me, and I don't think it's because of my boyish good looks. I think it's because they sort of recognize me and they're not sure. And then when it comes to them, they're like, oh, there's that guy. So, no, there's no good thing about it.
You should wear a T-shirt that says. You should wear a T-shirt that says "human."
So,
on
with
it.
that being said,
I'm human.
Well, yeah, I should.
No, but with that being said,
that's great. I believe it. I really
we
like
are
you.
humans. With that being said, we are humans. We do make mistakes. How do you try to rectify that with the people so they don't see you for the bad, but see you for your good?
Okay, well, I think being honest is a good start. And recognizing that when you start to equivocate and justify, then it diminishes anything. Right. I've said all the way down the line, whatever it is in my life, whatever mistakes or failings, and they're not all public ones, I try to own them. I try to learn from them. I'm a better person than I was probably 6 months ago. I'm certainly a better person than I was 10 years ago. You wouldn't want to have met me 25 years ago. I was a real idiot. So we get through these things. We improve. And like wine. And gradually, and there'll come a point probably when it's all too late, when I'm a lot wiser and a lot smarter. And the really thing is, even at my age, I feel like it's responsible as an adult, as a citizen, to at least tell people, well, you don't have to go down this route. You don't have to touch that stove to know it's hot. I'm telling you it's hot. And I'm telling you that behaving and reacting and being a certain type of person won't end well for you. If the only if consequences are the only way, like jail, that's the way you stop people from misbehaving, then maybe someone like me serves a public purpose. Maybe on some level, seeing what it's like to become a sort of pariah might deter somebody else from it. If a black guy had done what I did with that cop, they'd have probably got tased. They might have got shot. And I think that's an important lesson. I think people shouldn't throw their weight around. I think that people shouldn't take advantage of their status and circumstance. I obviously didn't realize that to the extent that I could have done and should have done at that time. What I take from it, is a lesson. The reason people were interested in it is because it revolted them. And I learned something from it. I can't. So
I'd say a lot of goodness.
Your question about what can I do to change people's minds. Yeah, but exactly, for me too. But I can't change people's minds. I'm not going to get the chance to have this conversation with, the same 16 million people that watch the video.
I think that people hearing you talk the way you're talking now is going to make people know who you are a lot. I mean, I really like you. I think you just talking the way you do is going to garner you a lot of fans. I think, because we don't hear this kind of honesty from anybody.
Well, and I
mean, I love it. I can listen to you talk all day long.
Yeah, but it's like they say style never goes out of fashion. I don't think honesty does either. One of the best conversations you'll ever have is with a stranger in an airport that you'll never see again. Why? Because you don't need to lie to them, right? You can tell them your real truth, right? You're not worried about the next date. You're not worried about, what they're going to think of you. You're never going to see them again. So it's very cathartic when you talk to someone. That's why people go to therapists to an extent. They're not really getting anything out of it other than the ability to unload honestly and not be judged. And that's something about the freedom of not being an employee. I mean, quite frankly, I couldn't act out and talk the way that I talk if I worked for somebody else because they'd have to fire me. I have a certain privilege, and I think I like the idea that I'll be known not necessarily as some kind of sage or some kind of philosopher, but somebody that whether you like him or whether you don't, you can reckon that he'll tell you his truth. And it's a lot easier. The reason I don't do a lot of and is I don't have to think about it much. Yeah, you just ask me something, I'll tell you. But be careful what you ask me. I might tell you the truth.
I do have another. I do have a question for you though about your opponent, Vern Buchanan.
No, wait.
Who is he, and why are you a better man for the job?
Sure. Well, I mean, he's had his turn. Let's be frank. I mean, 16 years is 16 years. I think that's long enough to get anything done. I mean, unless you're painting, the Sistine Chapel or something, you should be able to get it done in 16 years. I think innovation comes from renewal and freshness. I don't have anything against Vern Buchanan. I mean, I can make fun of him, but I make fun of a lot of people. I mean, he's very wealthy. He's $350 million in personal fortune. He lives in a 14,000 square foot mansion and flies on private jets. Let's be frank. What's that got to do with the average American? Not much. 40% of Americans don't have $500. 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. What could you possibly know about that? You might say, well, I know some poor people once, but it's been a long time since Vern Buchanan worried about the electricity bill or concerned himself with what was going to be for dinner. So being out of touch is a big part of the establishment generally, and they live in a whole bubble up there in DC. I was born into a generation and a family where we didn't reckon that we were poor because everybody was poor. Poverty is a relative thing. If you see kids in Africa running around with nothing, they got a big smile on their face because everyone's got the same nothing. The problem that we have here is that with the internet and so forth, we tend to look at it and see people that have things that we don't have and think that we'd be happier because of it. I can tell you straight up, I am no more happy today with the things that I have than I was 20 or 25 years ago when I didn't have those things. And when people talk about the best things in life being free, I'm not sure that they're free, but they're not expensive. Being positive, being outside, the seasons, friendship, all those kind of things don't cost any money. So I think as far as Vern Buchanan is concerned, he's, I'm sure, a perfectly decent guy. He doesn't really talk to me much. But as far as running, it's not about, being against him, as simply saying, hey, listen, we want to be a modern society. We want to have a range of voices out there. If we're going to have AOC, then maybe we should have someone like me there too. I'm not going to put my hands around her neck and choke her.
We'd like you.
I'm going to disagree with her profoundly on most stuff, but well, yeah, sure. I mean, that would make good TV. I'm not saying
that might actually get you more views than the law enforcement video.
I think. Oh, listen, if I ever get to DC, I won't be off the front page or the front of all these stations because I'm bankable as far as that's concerned. I don't know that's why you elect a representative, but if people wanted somebody that will do what they want, then I'm your guy because I'm ambivalent about. I think that the first past the post makes sense. If we're in a conservative district and I'm elected as a conservative, and I'm not going to substitute my judgment for that of people. So I'll do what it says on the box, which my opponent frankly hasn't. He's voted in a lot of ways.
So I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. With that being said, would you run for a higher seat later on?
Well, I don't know what higher seat that could be. I can't be president. That's a terrible thing. I mean, President Hyde, that would be awful. I mean, gubernatorial, statewide office is difficult because, again, of the money. On its face, if I got into a race, if I had the backing, if I got into the debates, I'd have a good chance because when people actually get to meet me and actually get to hear me, I'm not so very different to what they are, except that I've got the ability to articulate the point that perhaps other people would be nervous about saying. So I think I'm the kind of person that people don't mind standing behind. I think that they want a fighter. Yeah. I think there is some school of thought that people say, well,
this is very refreshing.
I like this guy in my corner. I don't necessarily want him to marry my daughter, but I would like to see him fight for me. And there's nothing in this.
Well,
I think that. Go on.
With that being said, I'm going to be very honest. When I started doing research, I was like, wow, this guy is a jerk. But now hearing you, I can see, oh, wow, the media has it wrong again. So with that being said, again, it is always good to hear from someone seeing the human side as opposed to the media side.
Why?
Yeah.
But isn't that the lesson?
Oh, and there goes.
I mean, isn't that maybe the argument here in terms of a podcast? You know, there was an article in a magazine here recently about me, and they were saying, you know, more or less all the things that you hate about Martin Hyde. And I actually gave them most of the lines. They spent 2 days with me, and I sat there and I said, well, you know, I did this, I did that, I did the other. And when the article came out, people said to me, well, wasn't that rude? I said, well, yes and no. I mean, I am what I am, and I've made, you know, the life that I've made. But it was an interesting thing there. That reporter turned up with an idea that he was going to hate me. And by the end of the time that we spent together, it was interesting. I almost like he felt sorry for me. I'm not looking for pity. I'm not looking for anybody to think that I got a raw deal. I got exactly what I deserved. But why not, as a general theme, turn this to a positive and say, okay, so, you know, we're going to face our issues. We're not going to celebrate just what we're good at. We're going to talk about what we're bad at. And we're going to talk about all of the things that are resentments that people might have. And maybe we're going to be able to turn it around a little bit. But I don't speak to you guys or anybody with the intention of changing your mind. You ask me a question and I'll reply to it in the way that I see. And if people like me, obviously I want to be liked. We all do, since we were kids, right? I mean, nobody wants to be hated. Talking of hated, you've lost somebody off the screen here. You know that, right? You've lost your man.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, I didn't know whether you count him up. It was just the three of us now. I mean, actually, I prefer this. I think that's a much better look.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, yeah.
Hey, but that's the lesson, right? But
yes.
That is the lesson. And,
I was going to come in gun-ho with, like, Hispanics. What's wrong with Hispanics?
You know, I'm an equal opportunity hater. I hate myself more than anybody else. I mean, you know, when people talk about, you know, a question of whether it's, you know, ridiculous comments about telling people to cut the grass or whether it's a question of chewing off a cop and, you know, equal opportunity hate is not much of a term to use, but the fact is that I've been rude to almost every subset of society, including, if you listen to me, I'm much more critical of me than any of you would ever dare to be, because I understand the frailty of the human spirit. We are all the sum total of our experiences, and in the end, we're most of us fairly ridiculous parodies and contradictions because we do things differently according to whether we're hungry, whether we're in love, you know, whether we think someone's listening. The only great thing about me and reaching my age is that I've given up with all that, although I am hungry right now, so we'll have to stop soon.
No.
So
he is back.
I talk about him now.
I mean, and they stuck him down on the far right corner. Well, yeah, that's funny. It's like slipping off into behind the looking glass.
I don't know.
So go on. We'll let you talk.
I don't know how much of what I just said you caught because I just all of a sudden went blank. But I was just trying to say that I think that the people that are going to watch
none of it.
I think that. Okay, really? I had said
we didn't get any of it. We didn't hear any of it. It was like it's like me. I was just talking to myself.
That we're talking about negative publicity and this and that, and people that don't like you because of the internet and whatnot. I was just simply saying that when they see this video or videos like this or interviews like this, they're going to see a completely different person than what they may have thought you were. Because I'm refreshed with who you are, to be very honest. So I think it's a great thing, even come on a small thing like this with us. It's going to help. It's going to help you out, I think. Go ahead.
I think it helped me out, but I think it's also cathartic, and I've talked about this a lot. I've done a lot of interviews, and a lot of people come in with their predispositions, and this is what I've learned. Right, I had more predispositions going in 6-7 months ago than I have today, because I know I'm not really exactly who they characterize. I mean, I'm aware of the fact that I can be irascible, I can be irritating, and occasionally I can't stop my mouth running, but I also know that for the most part, I'm reasonable, I'm fair, I'm generous when I can be, and I'll listen. 2 ears, 1 mouth. I talk too much, but I can listen too. And I think all of those things are valuable lessons. I think that if you can watch something like this and you can say, well, okay, so there's at least another side to that coin, because there always is, right? No matter how thinly you bake a pancake, right? There's always another side to it. And that's a really good lesson. I'm not saying that we should, always, hug it out and believe the best in everybody.
In closing,
I think there's relevance there. Yes.
So in closing, can we say that you have no regrets? You are who you are, and yes, you do have a human side, like we learned today.
Well, yeah. I mean, someone asked me this years ago after something else, and they said, "Do you have any regrets?" And I came up with what I thought was an immortal line. I was going to make a T-shirt with it on it, which is, "Regrets are for suckers," and they are. You can't go backwards in life, right? I mean, we don't have a time machine. We will learn from our bad moments. We'll remember fondly our good ones, and we'll move forward, until or unless somebody turns up with that DeLorean and gives me the chance to go back and do anything. No matter what I might want, it is there. It's what it is. And I'm going to live my life in the, not in the future. I'm going to live it in the present. And as far as where that takes me, don't spoil the story. I don't want to know. I know where we all end up eventually, but hopefully not anytime soon. So, I'm grateful for the opportunity that, not everybody back in the day that had put me in the stocks and thrown fruit at me. I actually get the opportunity to come on here. I had a lot of people troll me, and, I had people put dog poop on my lawn every day almost. I accept that. It's become less so. And I hope that, these things will balance themselves out. But the best lesson here is not whether I can change the narrative as far as Martin Hyde is concerned, is whether the people that view this or whatever else can see that whatever happens to you in life, so long as it's not the end of your life, you have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I found myself over the last 5 months.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Honestly, you changed my opinion on you.
Intentional, trust me.
I still have a whole lot of questions for you, but I know we have time restraints, so maybe you see us again sometime. I enjoy that.
Oh, I'll definitely come back. I'm the best cheap a guest as you'll ever get. We're going to fingers crossed that we. I know I'm going to get more than 10 votes, because I've already had at least 10 people send me a text of their vote by mail with their ballot cast with my name. So I think that we'll do a little bit better than perhaps people might think we'll do. I don't know about a Disney ending where the where the guy comes out of a disaster and wins, but whatever happens, I'm not sure that it's a bad thing. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that comes out of it that goes beyond me. I mean, I might or might not be interesting, but I think there's some interesting human elements to it that go beyond politics, and talk about the society that we live in. So I appreciate you guys. I'm going to love you and leave you. You're going to X me out, or what are we going to do here?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. on YouTube. And you could also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Rumble, Amazon Prime, iTunes, Anchor. And thanks for joining us. Bye.